Alright, somebody asked me my opinion on Michael J. White. So I got this new thing going on that I want to keep everything positive. So what are some positive things I could say about this guy? I don't really know that much about him. Um, I saw one movie from him. Um, one of my students, you know, I watched it with one of my students. I forgot what the movie was called. It might have been like something with bones. Something where he was in prison, he was fighting people, you know. Um, I've also seen a movie with them that had nothing to do with martial arts. It was like Why Did I Get Married, with Tyler Perry, the director. I like that movie a lot, actually. Michael Joe White was in there. What else do I know about him? I know he's in really good shape. I think that's a big plus. Oh yeah, another movie that I saw was no, not a movie. A video that I saw with him was he was like tutoring Kimbo Slice on some techniques that he learned from Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do. Um, so that short video where he's giving some tips. Now, it seems that he studied some of Bruce Lee's ways, studied his books, and it seems that based on that video, it seems like he knows what he's talking about, he has it down. There's a science to it, and it seems like he understands that science. He obviously values fitness, which is great, you know. And I think I've seen an interview with him too, where they asked him like, "Oh, what do you think? How would you par against like Bruce Lee?" And then I think he laughed and giggled, and he said, Bruce Lee weighed 125. I forgot how much he said he weighs, but he might weigh like 200 pounds. I don't know. But, he's basically saying that's self-explanatory, how much he weighs compared to Bruce Lee. He's in great shape. He could punch, he could kick. Um, he's an actor. I, I'm convinced that he knows how to defend himself pretty well. You know, um, being in shape and seeing his techniques, you know, makes me respect him. To be somebody that's capable of defending himself, and just being in great shape as a martial artist, training in martial arts, and being in great shape. That's already something to a high level. Um, and to understand Bruce's ways and the science behind like practical combat and what really works and what doesn't, and keeping to the simple. I think he understands that, and it's not that hard to understand. Once you get to understand that, then to practice it is not that difficult. It's very simple. Once you understand those techniques and you understand the science of like efficient combat, it just becomes just something that it becomes like second nature, you know, and then it boils down to just constantly being on top of your fitness to maintain your level of fitness, so then you're always like at your peak, and you're always prepared basically, to engage. Um, as far as the spirituality is concerned and meditation and all that, whether or not he lives a meditative life, whether or not he lives in accordance to like the Eastern ways, I don't know. I really don't. But what I do respect about him is that he's an actor. He's not, as far as I know, he's not a fighter. He's not somebody that's, fighting for money and hurting other people for money. He's making movies for money, which is pretty much what Bruce Lee did, and what Jet Li does, and what Jackie Chan does, and Donnie Yen does. And I respect that. But being an American, being a black African American, he's very big and large compared to a Chinese person. You look at Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Bruce Lee, they're all small people. but Michael Joe White is a huge dude, you know, compared to them, you know, like a lot bigger. I mean, he's not as big as Kimbo Slice, but he's a lot bigger than Bruce Lee, clearly, and Jet Li. And I think that's what the Wing Chun community was afraid of. Why they didn't want Bruce Lee teaching Americans is because once they learn these techniques, these Americans can be very destructive. You know, if they're not responsible with their powers. You know, and Michael Joe White is not like as big as like these pro wrestlers, but he's a big guy compared to Chinese people. You know, and that extra size combined with a high level of fitness makes him very destructive, you know, and I respect that he's an actor, even though if he wanted to, he could be a fighter, but he found another way to make money, an even better way to make money, because, you know, being a fighter is a lower level than being an actor, because being an actor, basically being a part of Hollywood is an upper echelon, it's like a higher level than being a fighter. Being a fighter is like, especially a cage fighter, they're like low down here. Hollywood's like up here. The only person that really makes a lot of money in combat sport is Mayweather, who's basically beyond Hollywood and all that in boxing. But Michael Joe White, if he wanted to, he could probably be a professional boxer. If he wanted to, he could probably be a cage fighter. If he wanted to, he might even be able to be a football player. I mean, it seems like he has a lot of talent, and I think a lot of very athletic African Americans out there can be a lot of different things. Like one of the best running backs in the NFL, he could probably be a cage fighter if he wanted to. He could probably be a boxer if he wanted to. You know what I mean? They just have a lot of options. You know, Michael Jordan's good at basketball, and he tried baseball. You know what I mean? A lot of these football players, they just jump into the cage to try to make money. But what I do is I respect the person that's really athletic, the person that could really do some damage when it comes to combat. I respect when he chooses a more peaceful route to make money, and he doesn't resort in hurting other people violently to make money. And for him to make movies to make money, I respect that. Especially another thing is he's not just making martial art movies. I mean, he was in the movie like, Why Did I Get Married, which is basically like a comedy romance movie, which is great. You know, and I remember reading that Bruce Lee wanted to get into other areas of acting. He didn't want to just stay with the martial arts because he felt that it was going to eventually die down, like the popularity, and he would have to go into something else, into a different way of acting. And actors that are very versatile, like actors like Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Denzel Washington, Will Smith, where they're acting in many different movies. Like, these are the people that I respect as far as like being versatile. You know, like Michael Joe White is not just acting in fighting movies and that's it. Like, he's versatile. He's in other types of movies, which I think is great. And it's not like, Tony Jaa, who's only in action films. You know what I mean? Like, Michael Joe White is doing different types of films, and I respect that. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a great thing when you see somebody that practices martial arts and he could really fight, but then he doesn't fight. Like, he finds another way to make money. It's almost like a beautiful woman, like extremely beautiful, that decides not to get into become a stripper, not to become a prostitute, not to use men for their money, but she becomes an actress, or she becomes an accountant, or she becomes a manager, or she becomes a doctor, or a lawyer, or a dentist, where it's like a real profession. It's not like, I was born with this beautiful body, so why don't I just like make money by having sex with it? You know what I mean? Like, that's like such a low level of human existence. And I think that for men, regardless if you're good at combat or not, once you get into like fighting for money, especially when it comes to like cage fighting, you're like going to one of the lowest levels of existence. Boxing is a little bit more like, you know, less gruesome, more professional, less violent, but still, it's still very, very dangerous. But when you go into acting and you make money from there, and you got into Hollywood, so basically people that get into Hollywood, they don't need to fight for money. You know, like Will Smith doesn't need to jump into a cage, neither does Denzel Washington. They're already in Hollywood. It's like, it's already like the top of the food chain. You know, it's like somebody that, you know, he already is in the Olympics. He doesn't need to worry about like joining the high school team anymore. I mean, he's in the Olympics now. You know what I mean? The Hollywood is like the main thing, you know, that will get you worldwide fame. You know, and even a lot of these fighters, they use that as a jumping board to get into Hollywood. So you see a lot of these fighters, you know, like that get success in the UFC. They end up, some of them go into Hollywood. You know what I mean? Not all can make it into Hollywood, but Michael Joe White's already in Hollywood. He made some movies, and you know, I respect that. I feel that he does know. He clearly knows how to defend himself. He clearly keeps himself in good shape. Um, and you know, he's talented. You know, but as far as being an artist is concerned, now there's a difference between like being good at fighting and being like an artist, like a martial artist. Like the movie that I saw him in, it's just like very, to me it's like a very low budget film, just like low budget movie where it's quickly thrown together. There's really not much thought out in it, and it's just almost like just silly fighting things. It's not like, clearly not a movie like Fearless and Hero with Jet Li. Clearly not a movie like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Clearly not a movie like Matrix. And that's another thing. Like Keanu Reeves, I feel like Keanu Reeves has like, he's been acting in many movies that have like some deep meaning. You know, beyond just fighting. Like Keanu Reeves is not a great at sparring like Michael Joe White, and Keanu Reeves is not as like ripped up as Michael Joe White, but the roles that Keanu Reeves chooses within the movies that he plays are a lot more like all encompassing. You know, like Keanu Reeves, Will Smith, Denzel Washington. Like Will Smith and Denzel Washington are not martial artists. They're not as ripped as Michael Joe White. They're not as, they can't spar as well as him, but the movies that they're in are so much more deeply meaningful. But the martial art films, they're not even martial art films, like action films that you know, movies like what Michael Joe White might be in, it's almost like nonsense type of films where it's like you have to have like a really low intelligence to be even enjoy a film like that. You know, because it doesn't stimulate any type of intelligence. You know, it's just like senseless violence on film, and that to me is not appealing at all. I pretty much had to be forced to watch the film because I didn't want to watch it. I didn't care to watch it, but I just happened to be at my student's home for like a celebration, and he just threw on the movie, and I had no choice but to watch it. But it's not something that I would ever watch on my own, or even seek out to watch it or watch it again. No. I feel that I'm just kind of, I'm like way beyond that. You know, I'm not like 9 years old anymore. You know what I mean? Like when I was really young, I used to watch like Jean-Claude Van Damme, like Bloodsport and Kickboxer, and I thought it was really cool when I was really young, but I'm not young anymore. I'm not like 12 years old. I mean, I'm like 33 years old. I mean, these movies do not appeal to me. You know, if anything, like something like Matrix appeals to me, the movie. You know, something like Hero, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Fearless. You know, like movies like that draw me in. You know, even a movie like Gladiator with Russell Crowe, I think is a great, well-made movie. But these movies that Michael J. White are in are not anything. To me, they're not worth watching. I mean, kicking and punching, elbowing and kneeing, hurting people. I mean, there's nothing new. It's like, okay, you know, you could fight. Big deal. There's a lot of people out there that could fight. A lot. It's not that hard to learn how to fight, basically. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the same repetitive garbage over and over again. You know, like Michael J. White, to me, is not too different than Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Wesley Snipes. I mean, Wesley Snipes was in great shape. Van Damme was in great shape. Michael J. White's in great shape. They could all kick pretty well. They could all punch pretty well. They're all ripped up. Scott Adkins is another one that's in great shape that could punch and kick very well. I mean, all this stuff is just the same stuff over and over and over, and it's just like there's nothing meaningful when it comes to action. It's just nonsense. I mean, even Sylvester Stallone's in great shape. Arnold Schwarzenegger's in great shape, but they're mainly like more about guns. They're not really like that in tune with the technical aspects of combat. But I mean, you just got a bunch of Americans that are in shape in these action movies, beating people up. Even Matt Damon's in these movies beating people up. Matt Damon's not as in great shape as the people that I just mentioned, and it doesn't look like he's like that in tune with the science of combat. But really, with all this technology, the computer graphics, the stunt doubles, they don't need people that are truly capable of sparring to be on film. It's just like unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like movies that are really impactful are like movies like Training Day with Denzel Washington, where it's like really deep. That movie, like I love that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like movies, you know, that have a deep like meaning. You know, I think another movie called Out of Time with Denzel Washington was a great movie as well. I mean, Denzel Washington had movies like, you know, he was in Glory. I mean, you could go through a whole list of his career and you'll find so many movies that are very, very impactful, and it could like be life changing. Some of these movies, you know, when you watch them, but you can never say the same for somebody like Michael J. White. It's just like pointless action movies. And there's a huge difference between like an action movie coming out of America and Hollywood compared to like a real martial arts film coming from like China. You know, like, you know, Hero, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Fearless. Those are like some of the best movies out there. You know, there's no comparison because like the West, they just don't get the spiritual aspect. They just don't get it. You know, they're buff, they're big, some of them might be on steroids, or all of them might be on steroids. They could beat you down if they want you to because they're so much bigger than you. Okay, you know, but it's still not martial arts. So, my assessment of Michael J. White, he's in great shape, he could fight, but where is he spiritually? Is he really a martial artist? I don't know. I don't know him enough like that. I just don't. But that's what I gotta say about him. You know, when Bruce Lee was making movies, he really wanted to instill wisdom in his movies. I mean, like especially when it came to Enter the Dragon, he wanted to really put a lot of philosophy in there, share part of the Chinese culture, and that's not something that Michael J. White's doing at all, because that's not a part of his culture. You know, so he's just a buff guy that could fight. You know, and does that make him a martial artist? If that's the case, then in my opinion, it doesn't make him a martial artist. You know, he's just somebody that is good at fighting. He's fit. But the artistic aspect is different. You know, it's very different. There's a spiritual element, you know, that you know, it's not easy to find that real combination. Like I could feel it in Bruce Lee, of course, Jet Li. I could feel it with Tony Jaa, you know, maybe even Jackie Chan. You know what I mean? Like maybe because the martial art spiritual element incorporates like teachings from like Buddha, you know, Lao Tzu, the Tao. And if these American actors, if they're not incorporating those teachings in their expression, then they're not really sharing the martial arts. They're just making a film, another movie filled with action, you know, stunts. You know, so just think about it, like the difference between like Michael J. White and like Sylvester Stallone. Okay, Sylvester Stallone is not known to be somebody that practices martial arts at all. But he's buff. Okay, so look at Michael J. White. Michael J. White is buff too. Sylvester Stallone is buff. But Michael J. White has more of an understanding of the science of combat, of unarmed combat, than Sylvester Stallone. You know, Michael J. White is somebody that you could tell that he's been training in the martial art techniques, unlike Sylvester Stallone. But just put it to the next realm now. Compare Michael J. White to Bruce Lee. You know, Bruce Lee had the spiritual. Michael J. White, I don't believe he has that. Bruce Lee was buff. Michael J. White is buff. Bruce Lee could fight. Michael J. White can fight. But this, what makes the difference between Bruce Lee and Michael J. White is the spiritual. What makes the difference between Bruce Lee, Jet Li, and Michael J. White is that Bruce Lee and Jet have the spiritual. And a lot of times the spiritual comes with that humbleness that comes from the East. But in the West, it's very difficult because you got like, you know, these big old Americans that are like super big and super strong, and they don't, it's really hard for them to get humble, you know, because they feel like they rule the world. They could just beat up the whole world, and they basically, they'll step on people when they feel like they can, or there's no compassion basically. In the West, there's no compassion. It's all competitiveness. It's all ego. It's all pride. It's all about beating people up for an advantage. It's all about taking what you want, not putting others in consideration. There's no compassion in the West. And that's one of the major differences between what makes a martial artist and just somebody who could fight. You know, so I really don't know enough about this person or in which to assess whether or not he's a real martial artist according to my definition and my understanding. But as I stated earlier in the video, you know, he clearly is very talented, and I do respect him. You know, and that's it.